The message came through on a Tuesday afternoon. Commander Lisa Hayes was working at her desk in the Earth Defense Headquarters when the emergency signal flashed red across her screen. She sat up straight and opened the transmission. The voice on the other end was shaking. It belonged to a Valerian, one of the peaceful aliens who had first contacted Earth 30 years ago. The Valerians were gentle creatures who believed in harmony and cooperation. They had welcomed humanity into the galactic community with open arms. Now they were begging for help. Lisa listened to the distress call and felt her blood run cold. A massive enemy fleet was heading toward the Valerian homeworld. The aliens called them the Ravager Horde. They were a swarm of ships that traveled through space, consuming everything in their path. They had already destroyed 12 different worlds. The Valerians would be next. She grabbed the report and ran to Admiral Chris Bennett's office. The Admiral was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had served in the military for over 30 years and had seen plenty of combat. But even he looked worried when Lisa showed him the data. "How many ships are they sending?" Chris asked, staring at the holographic display. 15,000, Lisa said. "The Galactic Council is sending their defense fleet, but it's only 400 ships. They can't stop this." Chris was quiet for a long moment. He remembered meeting Ambassador Kell from Valaria years ago. They had shared drinks and talked about their different worlds. Kell was a good person. His entire species was made up of good people. They didn't deserve to die like this. "How fast can we mobilize the Armada?" Chris asked. Lisa's eyes went wide. "Sir, the Armada hasn't been activated in decades. We have over 3,000 warships. The Council doesn't even know we have that many." When humanity had first joined the galactic community, they had registered their ships with the Council, but they had only told them about the patrol fleet, the small group of ships that defended Earth's immediate space. They hadn't mentioned the Armada. The Armada was humanity's secret weapon, built during the years when Earth was still fighting itself. Humans came from a dangerous world. Earth was what the aliens called a Class 1-2 death world. Most alien species couldn't survive there without protection. Everything on Earth wanted to kill you. The weather was extreme. The animals were predators. Even the plants could be deadly. Humans had evolved in that environment. They were stronger than most aliens. They were faster. They could handle more pain. And they were very, very good at fighting. Chris stood up from his desk. "Send the order. Full mobilization. I want every carrier, every battleship, every destroyer we have ready to go. And Lisa, tell them we're not going there to talk." Within 18 hours, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled was ready to launch. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Valkyrie. It was a massive battleship that stretched 3 kilometers long. Around him in space floated hundreds of other warships, each one packed with weapons and ready for combat. Jake was a career military officer. He had joined the Earth Defense Fleet right out of school and had worked his way up through the ranks. He had commanded smaller ships before, but the Valkyrie was his first capital ship. She was beautiful and deadly. 30 seconds to jump," called out Kevin Drake from the navigation station. Jake watched the countdown on his screen. Behind him, Amy Foster was coordinating with the other ships in the fleet. She was his tactical officer and one of the best strategists he had ever worked with. The fleet jumped into hyperspace together. The journey would take them several hours, but they would arrive long before the Ravagers could finish their attack on Valaria. On the Valerian homeworld, Coordinator Solera was watching her people die. She was old for her species, with gray skin and tired eyes. She had been coordinating the defense for 6 hours, and they were losing badly. The Ravager ships just kept coming. For every one they destroyed, 3 more appeared. Her fleet was being torn apart. The orbital platforms were burning. Soon the enemy would reach the planet itself. Then her sensors started screaming warnings. Something was coming through hyperspace. Something big. "Coordinator, I'm detecting massive distortions," her sensor operator said. "Unknown ships, incoming." "The reinforcements?" Solara asked, hope rising in her chest. "No, ma'am. These signatures are different. I don't recognize them. The first human ship came out of hyperspace like a bullet." The UES Valkyrie appeared, followed by hundreds more warships. They were dark and angular, covered in weapons. They looked nothing like the peaceful ships of the Council races. Solara received a transmission, a human voice, calm and cold. Valarian forces, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. Stay where you are, and let us work. Before she could respond, the human fleet opened fire. What happened next would be talked about for generations. The humans didn't slow down. They didn't ask permission. They simply appeared and started killing Ravagers with brutal efficiency. The human ships used weapons that Solara had never seen before. Their railguns fired solid slugs at incredible speeds. Each impact released as much energy as a nuclear bomb. Their missiles were smart, sharing information with each other and adapting to enemy defenses in real time. But what really shocked Solara was how aggressive they were. The humans didn't form defensive lines like the Council fleet had. They drove straight into the enemy formation, their weapons firing constantly. When they ran out of ammunition, some of them simply rammed the Ravager ships. On the Valkyrie, Jake was giving orders rapidly. Amy, target their command ships. Kevin, take us through the center of their formation. I want to split them in half. Sir. That will put us in the middle of their entire fleet, Kevin said, his voice worried. Good, Jake said. They've never fought humans before. Time to teach them what that means. The Valkyrie and her escorts dove into the enemy fleet. The Ravagers tried to fight back, but they were completely unprepared. They had evolved to fight civilized species, races that valued their ships and their lives. Humans valued victory more than safety. Lieutenant Ryan Cooper was flying his fighter through the battle. His squadron, the Ravager horde, had consumed 12 civilizations before reaching Valaria. They had faced every type of military force the galaxy could produce. They had adapted to every strategy, overcome every defense. But they had never fought humans before. Commander Beth Rivera stood on the bridge of her carrier, the UES Stormbringer. Her ship carried 200 fighters and bombers, all of them now deployed and hunting Ravagers through the debris field. She watched her tactical display and felt satisfaction at what she saw. The human fleet was winning. The Ravagers tried to adapt to the human tactics. They focused their fire on individual ships, trying to destroy them one at a time through sheer numbers. What they discovered was that human shields were backed by armor plating, designed to survive entering a planet's atmosphere at high speed. When the shields failed, the ships just kept fighting. A Ravager capital ship managed to get close to Beth's carrier. It launched boarding pods, trying to invade the Stormbringer and take it from the inside. Beth hit the alarm button. All crew, we have boarders. Marines, get to the breach points. Everyone else, arm yourselves from the emergency lockers. The Ravagers had studied the human data files that the Council kept. They knew humans were stronger than average. They knew humans were more aggressive. What they didn't know was that every human on a military ship knew how to fight. Not just the soldiers. Everyone. When the Ravagers breached the hull and poured into the carrier, they found themselves facing not just Marines, but engineers, medics, and even the people who worked in the kitchen. All of them were armed. All of them were angry that someone had damaged their ship. The boarding action lasted 12 minutes. When it was over, every single Ravager was dead. The humans had some injuries, but nothing serious. They patched the hull breach and went back to work. On the Valkyrie, Jake received damage reports from across the fleet. They had lost 37 ships. Another 100 were damaged, some badly. Against any normal enemy, those would be terrible losses. Against the Ravagers, it meant they were winning. Admiral Bennett wants a status update, Amy said. Jake studied the tactical display. The human fleet had destroyed nearly a third of the Ravager forces. The aliens were trying to regroup, but they were confused. They had never faced an enemy that refused to break. Tell the Admiral we're winning, Jake said. And tell the Valerians to hold on. Coordinator Solara watched the battle from her command center and tried to understand what she was seeing. The humans fought with a violence that shocked her. They didn't just destroy enemy ships, they hunted them down. They made sure nothing escaped. One of her officers approached her. Coordinator. The humans are using weapons that are banned by council treaties. Antimatter bombs. Nanite weapons. Things we agreed never to use. Solara looked at him. Do you want them to stop? The officer was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. No. Ma'am, neither do I, Solara said. The Ravagers came to eat us. The humans came to save us. I don't care what weapons they use. She was right to feel that way. The human fleet had come with weapons designed during Earth's darkest times. When humans fought each other, they had built terrible things. Nuclear bombs, chemical weapons, biological plagues. They had nearly destroyed themselves 3 separate times. Now they had brought those weapons to space, and they were using them on the Ravagers. Captain Eric Sanders commanded a destroyer called the UES Reaper. His ship was built to carry weapons that were too dangerous for normal military use. Weapons that most species considered too horrible to exist. He received authorization from Admiral Bennett to use Protocol Ragnarok. That meant all restrictions were lifted. He could fire anything he wanted. Target the center of their formation, Eric ordered. Antimatter spread, full dispersion. The Reaper launched 6 warheads. Each one contained a tiny amount of antimatter held in a magnetic bottle. When they reached the enemy formation and detonated, the explosions tore through space itself. Everything within 100 kilometers simply ceased to exist. Across the human fleet, similar weapons were deployed. Gravity bombs created small black holes that lasted only seconds, but swallowed dozens of enemy ships. Nanite swarms ate through Ravager hulls, turning them into clouds of atoms. The humans weren't just fighting anymore. They were exterminating their enemy. The Ravager hive mind, the intelligence that controlled all the ships, felt something it hadn't experienced in thousands of years. Fear. The humans were killing its ships faster than it could replace them, and they showed no signs of stopping. The hive mind made a decision. It would retreat. 6 of its largest command ships broke from the formation and ran. Jake saw them trying to escape and his expression turned cold. Amy, those ships are running. Don't let them. Sir, pursuit course plotted, Kevin said. All ships, follow me, Jake ordered. We're going hunting. The Valkyrie and her escorts broke from the main fleet and chased the fleeing Ravagers. These weren't just ships. They were the core of the hive mind, the central intelligence that directed everything. If they escaped, they could rebuild. They could attack other worlds. They could kill more innocents. Jake had no intention of letting that happen. The chase lasted 3 hours. The Ravagers were fast, but human engines were faster. Humans had always been obsessed with speed, with going farther than anyone thought possible. Their ships reflected that. They cornered the last command ship near a red dwarf star. It tried to fight back, but it was alone and damaged. Fire everything, Jake ordered. The Valkyrie's main railgun ran the entire length of the ship's spine. It was the biggest weapon on the ship, powerful enough to crack a small moon. The gun fired a single tungsten slug, accelerated to 30% of light speed. When the projectile hit the Ravager command ship, the kinetic energy release was like a small star exploding. There was nothing left. No debris, no radiation, just empty space. Back at Valaria Prime, something strange happened. The remaining Ravager ships simply stopped moving. Without their hive mind, they were just biological drones with no purpose. The human fleet destroyed them methodically, making sure nothing survived. The battle was over. Humanity had won. Admiral Chris Bennett stood on the bridge of his command ship and looked at the final casualty report. They had lost 286 ships. 743 more were damaged. 47,000 crew members were dead, but the Valerians were safe. The Ravager horde was extinct, and the galaxy now knew what humans could do. Commander Lisa Hayes received the reports back on Earth. She compiled everything into a file for the Galactic Council. They would want to know what had happened. They would have questions about the weapons, about the fleet size, about everything. 3 days after the battle, the Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. The massive chamber on Council Station was filled with representatives from 247 different species. All of them were watching holographic displays that showed footage from the Battle of Valaria Prime. The images were disturbing. Human ships ramming through enemy formations. Antimatter weapons erasing hundreds of vessels in single explosions. Fighters pulling maneuvers that should have killed their pilots. The council members watched in shocked silence. Council Prime Speaker Vorath was an insectoid alien from the Kree Dominion. His mandibles clicked nervously as he watched the footage. They violated 17 treaties, he said. Antimatter weapons. Nanite warfare. Unauthorized military fleet sizes. The humans have been lying to us for 30 years. Representative Solvin from the Zorathi Collective nodded agreement. They registered 400 ships with the Council. They deployed 3,000. How can we trust them? Ambassador Daniel Carter stood at the human platform. Behind him stood Admiral Chris Bennett and Captain Jake Morrison, both still in their combat uniforms. They had come straight from Valaria Prime. You're right, Daniel said simply. We didn't tell you everything. We registered our patrol fleet, the ships we use for defending our home system. We didn't mention the Armada because it wasn't your business. The chamber erupted in angry protests. Daniel waited for them to quiet down. Let me tell you why we have that fleet, Daniel continued. Earth unified, 70 years ago after centuries of war. We fought with chemical weapons, nuclear bombs, biological plagues. We dropped asteroids on our own cities. We almost made ourselves extinct 3 times. So when we finally achieved peace, we built that fleet for one reason, to make sure that if the horrors we inflicted on ourselves ever came from space, we would be ready. He pointed at the holographic displays. The Ravager Horde destroyed 12 civilizations before reaching Valaria. Your council fleet was going to be wiped out. The Valarians were going to die. All of them. So yes, we brought weapons that violate your treaties. We brought weapons designed by a species that learned war the hard way, and we used them because that's what saving lives required. Vorath's mandibles clicked again. You could have negotiated with them. Jake Morrison stepped forward. His face was hard. With respect, Prime Speaker. That's the thinking of someone who has never faced an enemy that wants to eat your species. The Ravagers weren't invading for territory. They were harvesting. You don't negotiate with a plague. You kill it. And what stops you from using those weapons against us? Sullivan demanded. You've shown that humanity is the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Why should we trust you? Admiral Chris Bennett spoke for the first time. His voice was calm but firm. Because we came when you called for help. Because we lost 47,000 people defending someone else's world. Because every person in that fleet volunteered, knowing they might die, because it was the right thing to do. He pulled up his own display, showing casualty distributions. 53% of our losses came from ships that deliberately put themselves between the Ravagers and civilian targets. We had captains who evacuated their crews and crashed their ships into the enemy to buy time for Valarian evacuation shuttles. We had pilots who burned out their engines making attack runs to protect your medical stations. The chamber was silent now. You want to know why you should trust us? Chris continued. Because we're from a death world, yes. We're stronger and tougher and better at killing than most species here. But we also value life more than you understand. When everything on your planet tries to kill you, you learn to protect what matters. Family, friends, allies. He looked around the chamber. The Valarians became our friends 30 years ago. They welcomed us with open hands. So when they called for help, we came. Not because of treaties or politics. We came because they needed us. And that's what friends do. Ambassador Kell stood in the Valarian section. His voice was steady despite his emotions. The Council should know that humanity asked for no payment. No territory. No political favors. They simply asked that we remember what they did. And that if we see another species in need, we help them as we were helped. The vote took 6 hours. There were heated debates about restrictions, monitoring, and defense treaties. In the end, the Council passed Resolution 4477 by a vote of 183 to 64. Humanity would be granted full Council membership. Their fleet would be recognized as the Council's rapid response force for major threats. And most importantly, the treaties about banned weapons would be changed. When authorized by humanity and approved by the Council, these weapons could be used to defend against threats to entire civilizations. Daniel Carter read the resolution and smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. What happens now? Admiral Bennett asked as they left the chamber. Now we go home, Daniel said. We rebuild, we mourn our dead, and we prepare for the next time someone needs help. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars through the station's viewport. Think they'll call us again? They'll call, Daniel said. The galaxy just learned that humans protect their friends. That's going to change everything. 2 weeks later, the memorial ceremony was held on Earth. In the Colorado Plains near Defense Headquarters, 47,000 black stone pillars stood in formation. Each one had a name, a rank, and an inscription that read simply, "They answered the call." Admiral Chris Bennett stood before the crowd. Families had come from all over Earth to honor their lost ones. He had written personal letters to every family, though he knew words were never enough. We talk about sacrifice, he said, about duty and honor. But what happened at Valaria Prime was more than that. It was a choice. Every person whose name is on these stones chose to put themselves between innocent people and death. They chose to fly into hell because someone called for help. He watched children place flowers at the bases of the pillars. The galaxy knows about us now. They know what we can do. But more importantly, they know who we are. We're the species that shows up. We're the ones who fight for those who can't fight for themselves. On Valaria Prime, Ambassador Kell stood at a similar ceremony. They were dedicating a monument to the human fleet. Coordinator Solara stood beside him. She had resigned after the battle, saying she couldn't command a fleet after seeing what real military power looked like. 6 months after the Battle of Valaria Prime, the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. Humanity was no longer the small, peaceful species that the Council had welcomed decades ago. They were now recognized as the most powerful military force in known space. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cooper received his new assignment while on leave at Earth. He had expected to return to his fighter squadron. Instead, he was being promoted to command a destroyer. The UES Vigilant was a small ship compared to the battleships, but she was fast and deadly. You'll be stationed at Tarsus IV, his commanding officer told him. It's a mining colony on the frontier. Not much happens there, but the Council wants human ships visible across their territory. Ryan arrived at Tarsus IV 3 weeks later. The colony was small. Just a few thousand miners and their families. The defense coordinator was a Valarian named Scylla. She was young, barely into adulthood by her species' standards. My mother fought at Valaria Prime, Scylla told Ryan when they first met. She saw what your people did. She told me that humans are the reason my homeworld still exists. Ryan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. 2 months into his assignment, the raiders came. They were a small pirate fleet, maybe 20 ships, looking for easy targets. Tarsus IV had valuable minerals and limited defenses. It should have been simple. Scylla sent out a distress call to the nearest Council patrol. Then she sent one to Ryan. Tarsus IV. We're 3 hours out, Ryan responded. Hold your position. Help is coming. The colonists held. They powered up every weapon they had, which wasn't much. The raiders laughed at them and prepared to attack. Then the Vigilant and her 2 escort ships dropped out of hyperspace. The pirates took one look at the human vessels and jumped away without firing a shot. Word had spread across the galaxy. You don't fight humans unless you want to die. Scylla met Ryan after the incident. They ran from just 3 ships. They're smart, Ryan said. Pirates want easy money, not fights to the death. Once they saw we were human, they knew it wouldn't be easy. Is it always like this now? Scylla asked. Do criminals just run when they see human ships? Mostly, Ryan admitted. though eventually someone will be stupid enough to test us. When that happens, we'll remind everyone why running is the smart choice. That reminder came sooner than expected. The Kronar Empire was a large military power that had been eyeing the peaceful Eldrin systems for years. The Eldrin were a small species, barely 1 million individuals across 3 planets. They had no military and relied on Council protection. When the Kronar fleet moved to annex the Eldrin systems, the Council protested but did nothing else. The Eldrin sent a desperate message to Earth. Admiral Chris Bennett received the message while reviewing fleet deployments. He read it twice, then called his staff. "How many ships can we get to the Eldrin systems?" he asked. 2 carriers and 6 escorts, his tactical officer said. "They can be there in 48 hours. Send them," Chris ordered. "And make sure the Kronar know we're coming." Captain Beth Rivera commanded the carrier group that jumped into Eldrin space 2 days later. The Kronar fleet was already in orbit around the first planet, preparing to land troops. Beth opened a channel to the Kronar commander. "This is Captain Beth Rivera of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have 1 hour to withdraw from Eldrin space. If you're still here after that, we will remove you." The Kronar commander laughed. "You have 8 ships. We have 60. You're bluffing." "I'm really not," Beth said. "Ask the Ravagers if humans bluff." "You can't. They're all dead." The Kronar fleet jumped away 30 minutes later. The Kronar Empire issued a formal complaint to the Council about human aggression, but they never went near Eldrin space again. Stories like this spread across the galaxy. Humans didn't fight in every conflict. They refused to take sides in political disputes, but when someone threatened the weak, when innocents were in danger, the humans came. On the frontier world of New Horizon, a rogue artificial intelligence tried to take control of the colony's systems. It locked down the life support and started killing people. The colonists sent an emergency call to Earth. The response team arrived in 16 hours. They were specialists in cyber warfare. Humans who had spent their lives learning how to fight digital threats. They cracked the AI's core programming in 6 hours and shut it down permanently. The colony administrator was amazed. Our best people had been trying to stop it for days. The human team leader, a woman named Karen Mills, shrugged. "We had practice. Earth went through 3 different AI rebellions before we figured out how to build them safely. Your AI was smart, but it wasn't as mean as the ones we dealt with back home." 1. These incidents built humanity's reputation. They were protectors, yes, but they were also ruthless when needed. Species that preyed on the weak learned to fear human intervention. Ambassador Daniel Carter gave a speech on the first anniversary of Valaria Prime. It was broadcast across every council world. "People ask why humanity protects other species," he said. "Why we risk our lives for people we barely know. The answer is simple. We know what it's like to face extinction alone. We've been there. We've felt that terror. And we decided that no species should feel that way if we can prevent it." He looked directly into the camera. "We're not perfect. We're violent and aggressive. We carry weapons that terrify most species. But we're also loyal and compassionate. We never abandon our friends. The galaxy knows both sides of humanity now. We're the monsters that protect you from worse monsters." Not everyone was happy with humanity's new role. Some species worried about human power. Others resented their influence. A few openly called for restrictions on human military activity. The Council debated this for weeks. Finally, they put it to a vote. Should humanity's rapid response authorization be limited? The vote was overwhelming. 219 species voted to keep the authorization unchanged. Only 28 voted for restrictions. Coordinator Solara, who had come out of retirement to testify, explained why. "Before the humans came, the Ravagers would have killed us all. Every man, woman, and child on my world would be dead. Instead, we're alive because humans chose to help us. Any species that votes to restrict that help is saying that their politics matter more than innocent lives. I won't be part of that." Her testimony carried weight. She had been there. She had seen what humans could do. And she had seen what would have happened without them. The galaxy was learning to live with humanity's power. It wasn't always comfortable. Humans were unpredictable. They made decisions based on morality rather than politics. They ignored protocols when lives were at stake, but they showed up when called. They fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves, and they never asked for anything in return except friendship and trust. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a task force based near the core worlds, 10 years after the Battle of Valaria Prime, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Humanity had become the protectors of the weak, the defenders of the innocent, and the nightmare of anyone who threatened peace. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie and looked at the latest distress call. A science expedition had been attacked by unknown hostiles near the edge of explored space. They were requesting immediate help. "How far?" Jake asked his navigation officer. 6 hours at maximum speed," Kevin Drake replied. "Then we go to maximum speed," Jake said. "Amy. Battle stations. Tell the crew we have people to save." The Valkyrie and her escorts jumped to hyperspace. The ships were older now, veterans of dozens of battles. But they were well-maintained and deadly as ever. Jake's crew had been with him for years. They trusted each other completely. When they arrived at the expedition site, they found 3 damaged research ships surrounded by raiders. These weren't organized pirates. They were scavengers, the kind that attacked soft targets and ran from real fights. The raiders saw the human ships and immediately tried to flee. Jake didn't let them. "Weapons free," he ordered. "No survivors." The battle was over in minutes. The raiders died without getting off more than a few shots. The human ships rescued the scientists and escorted them back to safety. One of the scientists, a young Valerian named Keth, thanked Jake personally. "You came so fast. How did you know we needed help?" "You called," Jake said simply. "That's all we need to know." This was humanity's reputation now. If you called for help, they came. It didn't matter if you were important or not. It didn't matter if you could pay them back. If you were in danger and you asked for help, humans would show up ready to fight. Back on Earth, a new generation was growing up with this responsibility. Young men and women joined the defense fleet in record numbers. They wanted to be part of the legend. They wanted to protect others the way their parents and grandparents had. Lieutenant Sarah Grant graduated at the top of her class from the Fleet Academy. Her first assignment was to a patrol ship near the frontier. She was excited and nervous. "Remember what you learned," her instructor told her before she left. "We don't look for fights. But when fights come to us, or to those who can't defend themselves, we finish them. That's what it means to be human." Sarah served on the frontier for 3 years. She responded to distress calls, stopped pirate raids, and helped evacuate colonies threatened by natural disasters. She never fired her weapons in anger during those 3 years. The human reputation was so strong that most threats backed down when they saw her ship. But not everyone was scared of humans. The collective was a machine intelligence that had been slowly expanding through the outer rim. They didn't fear death because they didn't truly die. When one ship was destroyed, the intelligence just downloaded into another. The collective reached a colony world called Haven. The population was mixed, with humans and aliens living together. When the collective fleet arrived and demanded surrender, the colonists called for help. Admiral Chris Bennett, now in his late 60s but still commanding the defense fleet, mobilized a response force. He put Sarah Grant in charge of a destroyer squadron. It was her first major command. "They're machines," Chris told her. "They don't get tired. They don't feel pain. But they can be destroyed. And they can be beaten. Show them what human determination looks like." Sarah took her squadron to Haven. The collective fleet was waiting. The battle lasted 8 hours and was brutal. The machines adapted to every tactic Sarah used. But she adapted faster. She split her forces, attacked from multiple angles, used mines and missiles and ramming attacks. When her ships were damaged, she kept fighting. When her weapons ran low, she got creative. In the end, the collective retreated. They had lost 70% of their fleet. Sarah had lost 3 ships but saved the colony. Why did they retreat? one of her officers asked. They could have kept fighting. Because they learned, Sarah said. They're intelligent. They calculated that fighting humans costs more than it's worth. They'll go find easier targets now. This was the pattern across the galaxy. Threats emerged, humans responded. And most of the time, the threats backed down, not because they couldn't win, but because fighting humans meant accepting massive casualties, even in victory. Ambassador Daniel Carter, now Earth's senior representative to the Council, watched this pattern with satisfaction. Humanity hadn't conquered anyone. They hadn't built an empire, but they had built something more important: trust. The galaxy knows we'll come when called, he told a group of new ambassadors. That trust is worth more than any territory or resources. It means when humanity needs something, others will help us. Because they know we've helped them. On Valaria Prime, old coordinator Solara passed away peacefully at the age of 93. Her daughter Scylla, now the head of Valerian Defense Forces, spoke at the memorial. My mother lived through the darkest day of our history, Scylla said. She watched our world come within hours of extinction. And she lived to see us saved by friends we didn't know we had. The humans taught us that strength and compassion can exist together. That being a warrior doesn't mean being cruel. My mother spent the rest of her life making sure we learned that lesson. Across the galaxy, similar stories played out. Species that had been saved by humans built memorials to remember. Children grew up hearing stories about human warriors who fought for others. The legend grew with each telling. Some stories were true, others were exaggerated. A few were completely made up, but they all carried the same message. Humans were different. They were dangerous, yes, but they used that danger to protect rather than conquer. Captain Jake Morrison eventually retired from active duty at the age of 65. He had served for 40 years and fought in more battles than he could count. His final act as captain was to train his replacement, a young woman named Helen Parker. Remember why we do this, Jake told her as he handed over command of the Valkyrie. Not for glory, not for power. We do it because people need us. Because we're strong enough to protect those who aren't. Because 30 years ago, someone called for help, and we answered. That's the legacy you're inheriting. Helen took command with pride. She knew the ship's history. She knew what the Valkyrie represented. And she was ready to continue that tradition. The galaxy was safer now than it had been in generations. Pirates thought twice before attacking. Aggressive empires reconsidered their plans. Threats to civilian populations brought swift human response. It wasn't a perfect peace. Conflicts still happened. People still died. But extinction-level threats were rare now. Species knew that if they faced total annihilation, they could call Earth, and Earth would answer. Admiral Chris Bennett finally retired at 70, having served longer than almost any other admiral in history. At his retirement ceremony, representatives from 47 different species came to honor him. You changed the galaxy, Ambassador Kell told him. Kell was old now too, his skin gray and his movements slow, but his voice was still strong. You showed us that military power could be used for good. That strength could mean protection rather than conquest. Chris smiled. We just did what anyone would do. We helped our friends. No, Kell said softly. That's what makes humans special. You think anyone would do it. But most species wouldn't. Most would calculate the cost and decide it wasn't worth it. Humans calculated the cost and decided it was worth it anyway. The legend of humanity continued to grow. New threats emerged. New crises developed. And every time, without fail, humans responded. They came when called. They fought when needed. And they protected those who couldn't protect themselves. Earth's motto became known across the galaxy. We answer the call. 3 simple words that meant everything. They meant that no species had to face extinction alone. They meant that crying out for help in the darkness would bring warriors who fought without mercy against those who threatened innocence. They meant that humanity, born on a death world where everything wanted to kill them, had learned the most important lesson of all. Strength means nothing if you don't use it to protect others. The galaxy had learned that lesson too, and it would never forget the day when aliens called for help and a human armada arrived without mercy, received regular requests for assistance. Some were legitimate emergencies, others were political games. Species trying to use human power for their own benefit. Jake learned to tell the difference. When a real threat emerged, he responded immediately. When it was politics, he politely declined. "We're not mercenaries," he told one disappointed ambassador. "We don't fight your wars for you. But if someone threatens innocence, if extinction is on the line, call us. We'll be there." That was humanity's promise to the galaxy. Simple, direct, and absolutely sincere. They would protect those who needed protection. They would fight those who needed fighting, and they would do it without asking for payment, or territory, or power. All they asked in return was that the galaxy remember what they had done, and that when another species needed help, others would step up the way humans had. The legend of humanity was growing, and it was only the beginning. "They changed us," Silara said quietly. "Before the humans came, we thought war should be avoided at all costs. Now we understand that sometimes war is the only way to protect what you love." Kel nodded. "The Council is already asking for human military advisors. 17 species want defense treaties. The Zarathi are redesigning their entire fleet, based on human tactics." "Are you surprised?" Silara asked. "No," Kel admitted. "The humans gave us more than military protection. They gave us hope. When the Ravagers came, we thought we were dead. Then suddenly there were these warriors who refused to let us die. How could that not change us?" Across the galaxy, the story spread. Some species spoke of humans as demons, terrifying death machines. Others called them guardian angels, protectors who appeared when hope was lost. The truth was somewhere in between. Humans were dangerous. That was undeniable. But they were also loyal, brave, and willing to sacrifice themselves for others. The galaxy was learning that having humans as friends meant you would never face extinction alone, and having humans as enemies meant you should run very, very fast. She looked at the casualty list and felt tears in her eyes. 47,000 people, all volunteers, all heroes. On Valaria Prime, Ambassador Daniel Carter stood with Ambassador Kel and watched the human ships in orbit. Some were badly damaged. Some would never fly again. But they had come when called, they had fought when needed, and they had won. "Your people are terrifying," Kel said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yes. But we're your terrifying people now. Remember that. The battle was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to have humans as allies, and what it meant to have them as enemies." On had been assigned to protect the damaged Valarian ships. The Ravagers kept trying to finish them off, and Ryan kept stopping them. 3 enemies coming at the Valarian flagship. His wingman Nicole Hayes called out. Ryan pulled his fighter into a sharp turn. The G-forces would have killed most aliens, but humans had built their ships with inertial dampeners and trained their pilots to handle extreme accelerations. He locked onto the lead Ravager and fired. The enemy ship exploded into gas and debris. The battle raged for hours. The human fleet cut through the Ravagers like a knife through paper. They lost ships, of course. War always had a cost, but for every human ship destroyed, they took down 50 Ravagers. The aliens of the galaxy were learning something important. Humans were from a death world. They were predators, wearing the skin of civilization. And when their friends were threatened, they showed no mercy.